Okay, so chapter two. So the first chapter, really, I would recommend going back and really looking at those outline notes. Try to do a good job of describing the brain and some real elementary structures of it, such as that triune brain and then the prefrontal cortex and neurons that are just operating throughout the whole of that. So she goes into now in chapter two what she calls flow. And flow is not coined by her, but it is a concept that many neuroscientists are beginning to use. And so she explains flow, what this is. Flow really is when you get information from thinking or even just externally. When you get that information, it shoots directly to that triune brain, so it shoots directly to the reptilian brain. And so remember, that's the automatic. So who you are down in your core begins to process it automatically, and you will respond because it will go from your reptilian up to your limbic system. Into that limbic system, it receives it, and then it shoots it all the way to your right hemisphere. So remember, which is very interesting to know that goes straight to the right hemisphere, not the left. So the right hemisphere is the visual, it's the emotional side of things. It's processing, but it's emotional, and it's still a bit automatic, and it's still a bit driven by propensity, who you are and tendencies. And so after that information travels through the right hemisphere, it goes to the left hemisphere, which is where your intellect is, your rationality. And so you begin to articulate it via words or see this as a certain type of message. We're able to then articulate it. And then that goes to the prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO of the whole body, really, but the whole brain in particular. And the prefrontal cortex, which is that fourth out of the triune brain, that fourth structure of the brain. And it then will shoot that information out to your body and begin to tell it how to take action via via that information. So that's a flow. It's just a natural flow. It's a good state to be in. It's where we're able to create. It's where we're able to be transformed. She talks about it's where we're able to use that transform our minds by means of that neuroplasticity and mirror neurons. But she'll also talk about disrupting the flow, and just even our culture now is absolutely killing the flow that we can have. That information gets messed up, and it never really hits that prefrontal cortex for us to be able to make really good choices. So the neurochemistry of personality. So this is, to me, I said, it's how the flow works in our everyday lives. We just even how we are created as people. So you think about our personalities. Like I said before, 2 years old or right at 2 years old, and then moving on, we are forged essentially by means of mirror neurons that mirror our parents, mirror our environment, wherever we are at 2 years old. We're training our minds, we're training our brains, and we're becoming our personalities via our genes coupled with those mirror neurons. And then I like what she says, because it's our traits, she says, are made up of chemicals and electrical impulses from our experiences that cause thoughts to shape who we are. So thoughts are that transformative thing, but it's experience, it's emotions, essentially it's flow. So over and over and over again, as a child, you're just receiving this information. You're in flow. You're in constant flow. You're in constant flow. It's going to reptilian, to the limbic, to the right, to the left, to the prefrontal cortex, boom, 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 boom. And essentially, automatically, you become who you are. And I like it because she says this can get disrupted now as adults. It gets disrupted all the time when people have different varying flows than ourselves, or different personalities. So if someone has something that I'm not comfortable with, I perceive that as a threat. I perceive that it just jacks up my flow, and I'm never able to operate as an optimal human being because of that. So that was a cool thing that she talked about. And then she goes on to just talk about stress, and stress is this big idea that stress is anything that it messes up our even kill. It messes up our homeostatic personality or state or flow. Anything that gets that off of where it should be. And so she talks about how the sympathetic nervous system, you don't even have to remember what that is, but the sympathetic nervous system, essentially that's our fight or flight. When we go into a stressful state, that begins to become activated. And so everything in the body everything in the body just goes into not just panic mode, but fight mode or flight mode. It just, all energy, certain organs shut down, some organs wake up, everything goes into let's fight. And so, as you can imagine, of course, that messes up flow. That messes up your flow state. So she sees stress as a bad thing. It's interesting because in the other book, stress is a good thing, but I believe that there's some reasons, and they're both right. And so she goes on to talk about how chronic stress is just absolutely terrible, but everyone would agree with that because it messes up your energy, your immunity, your digestion, blood pressure, etc., etc. So that's chapter 2. I would like to discuss, perhaps in person, just the concept of is stress bad or good, and why I think it's good and bad, but we don't have time on this video.